Can you believe it? Another year is upon us already and time is flying. And with the start of the year comes a chance to draw the line under the last and to look forward with positivity to the next. It's the time when those common New Year's resolutions are made, such as promising to eat healthier, starting tomorrow, or pledging to make use of that gym membership you took out at the start of the last year. And financial themes feature heavily in the top 3 of all New Year's resolutions made because people want to get back money control after chaos of December and Christmas spending. They have holiday spending hangover and want to be better with money as they see those credit card bills starting to land in January. And most importantly, start thinking about security and future planning, as the new year will often make people think about long-term stability, retirement, emergency funds and big purchases. So given that the start of the year is a natural moment to reassess, I've created this video not only for those of you who want to start an investing plan for your future, but to also help those who are already on your investing journey to increase your chances of becoming successful and reaching your financial goals. But as always, before we get started, I want to remind you that this video is for financial education purposes only and should not be construed to be financial advice. So let's kick this video off by me sharing my favourite money lessons, starting with lesson number 1, which is don't follow the news. Financial news media headlines can be the most powerfully destructive force to existing investors in making them sell out at a loss during market falls for fear and panic. And research conducted by Rothschild & Co. found that negative media headlines amplify behavioural biases, causing emotional responses that can make new investors less likely to invest, and those already invested to cash out, often at the wrong time, which is why investors should consume the news with care. Such emotional responses include loss aversion, which is the fear of losing money, herd mentality, where people copy others who are panicking, and availability bias, where recent scary headlines feel more important than what really matters more, which is long-term data. And this last point is really significant, demonstrating how sensational headlines influence a short-term mindset in many investors, when the long term is really where investors need to be focused, with Minds of Capital research noting that investors tend to give more weight to headlines than detailed analysis, especially during market volatility. And this can lead to overestimating risk, panic selling, misinterpreting market events, and avoiding investing altogether. Let's look at the 2020 COVID pandemic through data provided by the National Bureau of Economic Research as an example of how investors lost thousands by having their emotional responses triggered following negative news headlines in the press about the crisis. When the COVID pandemic hit in March 2020, the US stock market fell more than 8% in one day, and by mid-March had fallen about 30% from its peak. Right before the crash, around the 11th or 12th of February 2020, the S&P 500 was at an all-time high, and investors were optimistic about short-term stock market performance, optimistic about the real economy, expected a low probability of extreme market declines, and had relatively similar expectations. Confidence was high, fear was low, and new investors were being attracted to the stock market. After the market had fallen over 20% between March the 11th and 12th 2020, the COVID crash was in full force and the media machine was now cashing in with negative sensational headlines about the finance world coming to an end. Investors started to panic and were buying into a short-term frenzy and became more pessimistic about short-term stock returns, more pessimistic about the real economy, and their belief of the probability of further extreme stock market declines had increased. Crucially, the investors who had been most optimistic before the crash, those potentially with a shorter-term mindset, became the most discouraged, sold the most equity, and were the most likely to sell. After a partial rebound between April the 16th and the 17th 2020, where the market rallied to roughly 25% off the bottom, short-term thinking investor pessimism remained and people still feared more declines, but those with long-term expectations remained stable or even improved and held their positions as they had done throughout the pandemic. So even during a historic crash, the expectations of investors with a long-term mindset who had refused to buy into the media frenzy didn't collapse, and the only losers, and there were many big losers, were those listening to the headlines with short-term emotions, who had initially been the most optimistic before the pandemic, but who would then panic and sold the most. This same media failed to vigorously report the positive news stories as the market recovered, which was complicit in helping to keep many short-term thinking investors out of the market and to then not benefit from the recovery. And the long-term thinking investors, who remained in the market, were rewarded for their focus, with the S&P 500 index recovering from that pandemic low of just 2,237 points by rising 211% to 6,966 points as of January the 9th this year. A £1,000 investment at the bottom would now be worth over £3,100, and that's excluding dividends. And we've had other crises since COVID where the markets have crashed, but have then gone on to new highs, such as the infamous Liz Truss budget of 23rd of September 2022, and Donald Trump's announcement of tariffs on the 2nd of April 2025. The message is clear from this first lesson. React to news headlines at your peril, and instead be patient, understanding that investing is a long-term process, and adopt a long-term mentality. Exercise discipline. Stick to a plan instead of reacting to market noise. Maintain control of your emotions. Manage your fears and greed, and be self-aware to recognise your biases, such as loss aversion, and understand your attitude to risk. And all this talk about market crashes takes me nicely on to lesson number 2, which is to stop trying to wait for the best time to start investing. I know it sounds counterintuitive, as a market could crash at any time, and you probably wouldn't want to invest a lump sum the day before, but waiting for the right time might be a long wait that costs you thousands and never comes. Let's take a look at perfect timing Priya and consistent Connor. Priya is convinced that the secret to wealth is waiting for the perfect moment. She saves money in cash and only invests when she feels the market is safe. Connor doesn't try to predict anything. He invests £200 every month, no matter what the headlines say. Both start in January 2010. Both invest for 10 years. Both invest the same total amount, £24,000, but with dramatically different results. Priya, the market timer, waits for a good entry point when things feel more stable. She ends up investing only 5 times over the decade, always after the markets have risen and when the news feels positive. Her problem with this method is that by the time the news feels safe, the market has already gone up. Nevertheless, she still manages to grow her £24,000 to £31,000 over the 10 years. Connor invests every month. Through the Eurozone crisis, the 2011 US credit downgrade, Brexit, the 2015 China slowdown, the 2018 correction, and the early COVID crash. He never waits for that right moment. He pays no attention to what the market is doing, sometimes buying expensive stocks when markets are high and cheaper stocks when they're low, capturing the average price over time. This method is often referred to as pound or dollar cost averaging, where you just invest a small amount regularly and consistently to get the average share price over a longer period of time, rather than investing a lump sum on one or much fewer occasions in response to market conditions. And dollar cost averaging enabled him to grow his £24,000 to £43,000. That's £12,000 more than Priya had managed with her timing approach. So why does Connor win and Priya lose? Well, firstly, markets rise more often than they fall. If you wait for the perfect moment, you spend most of your time then sitting in cash and earning a lower return, rather than maximising your time in the market to take advantage of the effect of compounding on your wealth. The best days often follow the worst days. Missing just a handful of strong recovery days destroys long-term returns. Market timers like Priya almost always miss them. As mentioned earlier, headlines feel scary, but recoveries are powerful. The news tells you when things are bad, it never tells you when the bottom has passed. Consistency beats accuracy. You don't need to be right, you just need to be present in the market to benefit from the stock market rises. The lesson for new and inexperienced investors is that there is no best time to start investing. There is only starting as early as you can to maximise the time you have and staying consistent once in the market. As trying to time the market, although feeling smart, means being out of the market for crucial periods of time, buying late and missing the biggest gains. So in maximising your time in the market and being consistent, you won't want to be chopping and changing investments. And lesson number 3 is don't chase short-term winners. For over 30 years, Dalbar, an independent financial research firm, has measured actual investor returns, what people really earned, versus market returns, what they could have earned by simply staying invested. The results are astonishing. For instance, if you just stayed invested in a fund that tracks the S&P 500 over 30 years, the market return would have been roughly 10% a year. But Dalbar found people are often susceptible to chasing the hot funds and noted that the average investor earned only 3 to 4% per year. That's a 6% deficit a year purely caused by behaviour. And the Dalbar study is very clear about why. The biggest reason investors underperform is that they chase past performance, which ends up with them buying high and selling low. They analysed millions of investor accounts over a longer period and found consistent patterns. During the dot-com bubble at the end of the 90s, for instance, investors piled money into tech stocks after huge gains had already been made. Tech crashed 80% and investors then sold out at the bottom. During the oil and commodities boom between 2010 to 14, money flooded into commodity investments, only for the price of oil to collapse and for investors to then bail out at a loss. And between 2017 and 2021, retail investors bought at the top during an era of crypto and meme stock mania. Many lost over 70%, with most selling after a crash. Dalbar's blunt conclusion provides a stark warning for those trying to capitalise on the next best thing. Unless you get lucky, you will almost certainly be buying after big gains and selling after big losses, and this behaviour will destroy your returns. The alternative is not to treat investing as an adrenaline rush, and lesson 4 is to keep investing boring. The media wants us to believe that investing is an exciting experience. Fast moving, high stakes, hot new investments every year, meme stocks, etc. However, the best way to invest is actually boring. Warren Buffett once said that activity is the enemy of investment returns, when warning that doing less and keeping investing simple leads to better returns. His illustrious sidekick Charlie Munger said that the first rule of compounding is never to interrupt it unnecessarily. His point being that constant tinkering destroys returns, but boring steady compounding wins. And John Bogle, founder of Vanguard, said that the 2 greatest enemies of the equity fund investor are expenses and emotions. Boger's entire philosophy is built on the idea that low-cost, boring index funds outperform flashy strategies every time. All these quotes from globally respected investors reinforce the same message. Boring beats brilliant, consistency beats excitement, long-term beats short-term, simple beats complicated. Why? Well, investors who are building real lasting wealth are not chasing the next best tip. They are the ones to buy boring broad market, low-cost index funds and ETFs like an S&P 500 or global ETF, and that's it. There is no stock picking, no market timing, and no excitement. But here is what boring gets you. 100,000 invested in the US stock market over 30 years, where you simply reinvest the dividends, could give you a worth of about 1.5 million roughly. That's 15 times your initial investment, just by staying invested and letting time on compounding do the work. The bottom line is that boring beats exciting every single time. So if in search of financial success and wanting to keep things boring, the next lesson is equally important, which is don't make it complicated. There is no evidence that those who have complicated portfolios get better returns. In my last video, I spoke about this and provided data that strongly argues for keeping things simple and being stable and consistent in what you are doing by not tinkering too much, not holding too many funds, and not chasing the next big thing, as making investing complicated can cost you your returns and only make things worse. This whole idea that investing needs to be complicated for it to work is made up by those who want you to pay them to do it. The financial industry wants you to feel overwhelmed with investing and goes out of its way to make you feel silly or stupid by deliberately making things sound complicated. It is a financial marketing machine at work, capitalising on your fear and uncertainty. And there are lots of people out there willing to do the investing for you for a big fee and will provide you with the financial jargon and complicated strategies to make you feel uncomfortable about making decisions for yourself. And what happens to many of us is that we get so overwhelmed, we never pull that trigger to invest, or we rely on so-called financial professionals to manage our money for us. But here's the thing. No one can predict with any certainty how the markets will react in the future, even with all the experience, qualifications and resources at their disposal. So instead of getting yourself wrapped up in a complicated spiral of buying more and more investments, or paying a large fee for someone to provide you with a complicated portfolio that will need constant monitoring and updating, keeping things simple will provide you with the market returns, which almost always beats paying someone a fee to overcomplicate things with plans to try and better this. Paying active fees can also be detrimental to our wealth, with all those additional costs you will undoubtedly occur from those active fund managers or for ongoing professional advice, eroding away any portfolio gains, or from all that precious time wasted by hesitating and not using a simple strategy to get started in the market to benefit from compounding as soon as possible. The truth is that investing is not complicated. You don't need to understand all of the jargon to start with, but will immediately reap the rewards of broad market exposure and compounding returns from investing in just one index fund or ETF if you're choosing. I remember when I first started to invest in my Vanguard account. I was scared of making the wrong move and I spent weeks and months watching the lines of market graphs go up and down. But eventually realised that if I just invested in something diverse that invests in everything, then I'll have all the bases covered. Then over time, I became more confident and knowledgeable, realising that creating a simple investment portfolio doesn't need rocket science. With just 1, 2 or at most 3 simple funds, and no more than maybe 30 minutes of my time spent every 6 months in my portfolio to become a bona fide investor. So this year, don't let complexity stop you from getting started. Pick a simple strategy, automate it, and start building wealth. We spoke about keeping investing boring and simple. Lesson number 6 now talks about the last element for it all to work, and that is time. Long-term investing works because time, patience, and compounding do the heavy lifting. And when it comes to effective investing, you have to think long-term. And I mean really long-term. Benjamin Franklin, one of the earliest champions of compounding, once said that money makes money, and the money that makes money makes money. This is a perfect example of exponential growth that the power of compounding will give you if you stay invested long enough. Warren Buffett's entire fortune is essentially a real-world demonstration of what happens when you start early, stay invested, and let compounding run for decades. Buffett began investing as a child and kept his money in the market for more than 80 years. He consistently bought good businesses, reinvested the profits, avoided selling, and let time do the work. But here's the part that nobody expects. Almost 90% of his wealth came after he turned 60. Not because he suddenly became a better investor at that time, but because compounding finally kicked into gear. For decades, his net worth grew slowly, then it exploded. In short, he got rich slowly, then all at once. And that's the real lesson. You don't need perfect time or secret strategies. You just need time in the market. Start early, stay consistent, and let compounding do the heavy lifting. Now granted that Warren Buffett is an excellent stock picker, but his real secret recipe that truly compounded his wealth is the fact that he approached investing as a long-term endeavour and not as a short-term money-making scheme. That's the power of compounding. For many of us it could feel slow, painfully slow, especially in the early years. We contribute and reinvest, yet nothing seems to move. However, when we give it enough time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we'll start to see the growth accelerate and then explode like it did for Warren Buffett. So let's learn from this wise man, and in 2026 commit to approaching our investing in decades, not days or months, and follow his advice when he says that the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Just as your investments will compound more and more the longer you hold them, the same applies to the negative compound drag on your portfolio's performance with the higher fees you pay over the longer period of time. So lesson 7 is do not ignore fees, no matter how small they seem. We cannot control most things when it comes to investing, as we have no idea what the future will hold and what regions, companies and sectors will fare best over time. But one thing we can control is how much we pay for the privilege of investing, and to then keep costs to a minimum. This includes the accounts we use, the financial instruments we invest in, whether passive or active, being tax efficient, and which broker or platform to do our investing through. Fees can be felt from every direction, and what might individually feel small can add up collectively, especially the longer you keep paying them all. And a comparison between two investors, low fee Lucy and high fee Harry, demonstrates how paying higher fees can be detrimental to your long-term wealth building. Both invest £300 per month for 30 years and earn a 7% annual return. Everything is identical except for fees, where low fee Lucy has tried to keep hers as low as possible, paying 0.1% in total by choosing a low-cost investing platform as the place to hold her investments, and then purchasing a passive ETF that will provide the market return for a very low TER fund fee. But high fee Harry has not realised how many fees he is paying cumulatively, and incurs total cost of 1.5% through his broker charging him high investment custody fees, and through his fund of choice being actively managed with high fund costs, as he wanted to try and beat the market return that Lucy is paying a lower fee to match with her fund of choice. After 30 years, low fee Lucy has invested a total of £108,000, and her investments compound almost untouched by her low fees to achieve a final value of £365,000. High fee Harry, however, gets a much lower return of £275,000 for his total investment of £108,000. He invested the same amount for the same length of time in the same monthly pattern, getting an identical market return, even though he tried to better it with an active fund. And the only difference was cost, with the fees he was paying leaving him with a total return £90,000 smaller than Lucy. So why do fees hurt so much? Well, because fees compound against you, just like returns compound for you. A 1% fee sounds tiny, but over 30 years it quietly eats 25% of your final wealth. You never feel that loss because it's taken in tiny slices every year. And the drag gets worse over time. The bigger your portfolio becomes, the more the fees take. The main lesson to be taken from this is that the lower your overall fees, the higher your final returns. But a sub-conclusion also is that you don't need to beat the market by paying an active fund manager higher fees in an attempt to get the high return. You just need to stop the fees from beating you. So we've spoken about how you would not try to time the market and to just invest consistently in the most low-cost way as possible, with a simple strategy at the earliest possible stage to maximise your time to fully take advantage of compounding. But with all that being said, there is still merit in holding something back. And the final lesson is don't underestimate the power of cash. From both a practical and behavioural context, leaving a cash reserve to deal with emergency gives flexibility, peace of mind, liquidity, and could be the thing that prevents us from selling out when the markets are bad. And having a cash reserve is not just something confined to retail investors like you or I. A Harvard Business School study looked at the 2008 financial crisis and how early that year, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway Corporation was sitting on almost $50 billion in cash. This meant that when a crisis took hold, you didn't need to sell anything at a loss. Berkshire Hathaway could operate normally even as the credit markets froze. They had the flexibility to act while others were paralysed. Most investors were forced to sell to raise cash. Buffett didn't have to. He then used the cash to make huge investments when prices collapsed. Because he had cash, he could negotiate extraordinary terms that ordinary investors never get. And Buffett repeatedly says that he doesn't try to predict crashes, he simply keeps cash available so that he can act when markets miss price-based businesses. Buffett didn't survive 2008 because he was smarter than anyone else. He survived and profited because he was aware. Cash equals safety and opportunity. And it's advisable that you should have this cash reserve in place before you start investing in the stock market. And the last thing of all when it comes to the power of cash is to let the thought of money motivate you to keep you on your invested path for the longer term. Money can buy a lot of things, nice vacations, nice toys, nice experiences. But out of all of the nice things that money can buy, the greatest thing it gets you is financial freedom. Robert Kiyosaki put it perfectly when he said that financial freedom is freedom from fear. So this year, remember what you're actually working towards. It's not a fancy car, fancy toys, or a big house. It's the freedom to live life on your own terms. Please don't forget to comment below and share what your strategy is for this year and beyond. And thank you guys for watching once more.